Can things get any worse for these unlucky people? Let's dive in and find out. Starting with number 5. The cure for a broken heart is $9 million. Keith King won almost $9 million from his wife's lover after an affair ended their marriage. Keith and his wife Danielle lived in North Carolina, a place where jilted husbands can sue affair partners for damages. The affair began when Danielle met Francisco Huizar III in New York City. She later testified in court that she pursued a romantic relationship with Huizar. After learning about the affair, Keith sued Francisco for criminal conversation and alienation of affection, both of which are apparently things you can be sued for in North Carolina. Keith also claimed that the adultery and alleged fight by Francisco made his company, King BMX Stunt Shows, lose revenue, an employee, since Danielle worked for the business, and more BMX stunt shows. While Keith was a successful business owner, Francisco worked as a marketing manager and earned $84,000 a year. It's not peanuts, but he's not rich either. Francisco's attorney said that the Kings' marriage had been breaking down for years because Keith was 15 years older than his wife and that he was controlling and manipulative. The couple, who shared a daughter and had been married for 6 years when the affair began, fought frequently. Keith regularly went through Danielle's phone, tracked her locations, forced her to wear bikinis and stilettos, and wouldn't let her dye her hair any color other than blonde. That kind of behavior didn't work for Kanye either, Keith. Francisco and Danielle met at one of King BMX Stunt Show's events where Francisco was working. The two grew very close, with Francisco spending as much time with Danielle as possible. He rented a room down the block from her family home, and when Keith decided to treat his wife to a spa day, Francisco would join her. Since Keith kept such a close eye on Danielle's texts, it wasn't long before he grew suspicious of the pair's friendship. Keith physically confronted Francisco about the affair, allegedly prompting Francisco to put him in a chokehold. Francisco was then charged by police. In North Carolina, people can sue for infidelity, referred to as alienation of affection. Keith provided hotel receipts, social media posts, and call logs to prove his wife's infidelity. North Carolina Superior Court Judge Orlando Hudson, who was featured in the Staircase documentary, ruled in Keith's favor. Judge Hudson ordered that Francisco pay Keith $8.8 million. Francisco and his lawyer planned to appeal the verdict. While the law seems a bit strange and outdated, on some level it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If more people knew they could be sued for cheating, maybe they would take their marriage vows a little more seriously. Number 4. Judge this judge. New York City ex-parking court judge Emmanuel Amofa started a website that allowed parking violators to get rid of their tickets for a small fee. Once violators paid Amofa, he doctored their Muni meter receipts to win their cases, collecting 20% of the original fine. Home improvement contractor Giancarlo DeLellis said he constantly received parking tickets, something he saw as just the price of doing business in New York, and hired Amofa as his broker to help fight them. There was no evidence that Amofa was running a scam at first. He would send DeLellis' invoices with the numbers of tickets his company received that week, how much money Amofa saved him, and the outstanding amount that DeLellis owed. Amofa also seemed legit. He's an ex-parking court judge. He published a book about how to beat parking tickets and ran a website, parkingticketbusters.com, which contested summonses for clients. Rather than go to the bulk ticket courtroom, Amofa fought each ticket by email and submitted a defense online. His system evaded detection because each ticket was disputed separately online and dispersed among as many as 200 judges. He won the dismissal of hundreds of DeLellis' tickets and only lost on a few. Amofa's scam was successful until a parking ticket judge noticed that the proof in one case seemed suspicious, so he sent it to the fraud division for parking violations. A meter receipt showed that DeLellis appeared to pay the meter when the parking ticket was issued. The judge discovered that not only was that receipt doctored, but so were hundreds of other ones that Amofa submitted. Amofa appeared to take real receipts and alter them to cover the time and dates of the tickets. The department uncovered that many of the submitted receipts were from machines that weren't in service at the time, or showed rates not charged at those meters, or allowed for more hours than were available. Officials said that the vehicle owners were still legally responsible for the unpaid tickets and high penalties associated with the scam. When DeLellis learned of Amofa's operation, he knew he was going to be held responsible for paying his tickets back in full. However, penalties meant that he owed much more than his original tickets. DeLellis Ellis had 3 years worth of tickets that totaled $25,400, but with penalties applied, he owed $132,000. He said that he had to lay off 2 workers and had to take 3 company trucks off the road for fear they'd be towed. Although the city argued that people should have known better, many of Amofa's victims reasonably claimed to trust him because of his status as an ex-judge. Over the course of 3.5 years, Amofa submitted phony documents to get 816 summonses dismissed. His clients collectively owe $112,000 plus $282,000 in penalties, bringing their total to $394,000. Amofa received a 5-year ban for acting as a ticket broker, but wasn't arrested for his fraudulent operation. And we're not saying there was anything fishy going on as far as Amofa's punishment, but this guy was pretty clearly scamming people. To say people should have known better is like saying, well, you know, he is an ex-judge. It sounds more like someone had some friends high up looking out for him. Number 3, switching deeds. Jess and Jacqueline Morecroft thought they'd bought their dream home until they learned they were the victims of a mortgage scam. The Morecrofts purchased the $1.26 million property in Queensland, Australia. They moved in and raised their 2 daughters in the 3-bedroom home. After living there for years, the Morecrofts discovered they never legally owned the property. According to the previous owner, a relative used the property as collateral for a loan, which later defaulted. Without the couple's knowledge, the home sold for $2.6 million at an auction 5 years after the Morecrofts moved in. Before the family moved into the home, the Morecrofts were told another party may have a claim to the house. They were then told they could proceed with the sale 6 months later and moved in, even though the property was never officially in their names. The previous owner sued the couple, claiming a relative fraudulently mortgaged the property without her consent. Despite the legal drama, the family lived in the house for 5 more years and even renovated the garage into a playroom for the kids. The Supreme Court of Queensland ruled that the couple's property ownership was null and void, as the fraud of another person is what got the mortgage. Additionally, the court found that the Morecrofts had no legal interest in the property because it was never officially transferred into their names. Although they thought they owned the house outright, when the property was sold again, the Morecrofts realized they had lost everything. They moved into a rental property and began legal proceedings. The Supreme Court ruled that the state owed the Morecrofts $2.7 million for damages of breach of contract and ordered the government to pay. The ruling confirmed that the state was liable as the couple was deprived of their equitable interest in the property. In response, the government said that the Morecrofts had to seek recovery for damages from the original owner first. The government claims that since the Morecrofts never actually owned the property, they weren't direct victims of fraud. That's some mental gymnastics there, isn't it? Having already spent a back-breaking $300,000 in legal fees, the couple started a petition demanding the state pay, which gathered over 17,000 signatures. At the time of this video, the Morecrofts are still trying to get their money back. And it's such a cliche government thing to say, isn't it? Oh, we don't have to pay because you weren't a direct victim. You only spent your life savings on a house, lived in it for 5 years, and were forced out by the real victim. Also, you owe us taxes for that thing you did a few years ago. Number 2, not her couch. Scammers hacked Monique Sherman's Facebook to post fake ads for items that didn't exist. Hackers compromised Sherman's details and locked her from her Facebook and Instagram profiles. Then they posted ads on her accounts, letting buyers think they were buying stuff. The scam started when Sherman was posting on her accounts one morning. The page started flickering, and then she was asked to put in her password. But when she tried to, it didn't work. She started getting confusing notifications on her phone claiming she was selling things. Sherman watched as scammers sold a couch from her account that she had never even seen before. It was annoying, but it wasn't a real problem. Then strangers started coming to her door to pick up the stuff they purchased. Victims paid online and turned up at her door, one demanding the sofa they spent $300 for. 3 other people showed up as well, also demanding the stuff they paid for, each becoming irate when Sherman didn't have anything they bought or their money. Fearing other angry, deceived buyers would show up, Sherman fought to remove the ads, but some remained, including the ad for the sofa. There were enough angry victims that she had to install a home security surveillance system and put up pictures of the police report she filed on her front door. Sherman widely republished the sofa ad, warning that it's a scam and encouraging others not to fall for it. But really, who pays for things on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist before checking it out in person? If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here and don't click away to find out how unlucky this country's citizens are to have this family run their government. Number 1, double dipped. News anchor Nidhi Razdan fell victim to an online phishing attack when she took a fake job offer from Harvard University. The accomplished journalist won the International Press Institute and wrote the book Left, Right, and Center: The Idea of India. The Indian household name resigned from her national broadcaster position after 21 years to begin lecturing at the Harvard Extension School. She received an email inviting her to speak at an event at the Harvard Kennedy School. The event organizer contacted her separately to tell her that a teaching position was available and asked if Razdan was interested. Of course she was. So she submitted her resume but didn't expect anything to come from it. A few weeks later, she had a 90-minute virtual interview where the interviewers asked her legitimate and professional questions. The position was for a journalism degree program which Harvard didn't offer at the time. While it was a red flag, Razdan believed she would be teaching students of the Harvard Extension School, which did offer a Master of Liberal Arts and Extension Studies and had a journalism option. Having taken part in a thorough virtual interview for the Ivy League University, Razdan received several emails from people posing to be members of staff. She accepted a job offer which was written on an official Harvard letterhead. The fake Harvard employees even contacted Razdan's references. All Razdan needed now was to provide personal information for her work visa. While Razdan awaited approval, COVID-19 pandemic broke out and caused a faculty orientation event to be canceled. The start date for online classes was also pushed back from September 2020 to October 2020 and again in January 2021. Razdan still had no reason to believe she was being scammed. The fraudsters sent her fake class schedules with details about the subjects she would be teaching and a breakdown of her class. She was supposed to receive the first installment of her monthly salary in January 2020, but the money never came. Her contact at the university claimed there was a delay in the bank transfer and a COVID-related IT issue. In December 2020, she emailed the head of HR at Harvard, but never got a response. She later reached out to the dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences office. The office replied that there was no record of her position or employment. Razdan then realized she'd been scammed. After learning that the scammers stole her personal information, Razdan filed a police report. It's unknown if she lost anything more than her career and reputation, but it's possible that her identity being stolen could cause a host of issues. Having given up a 21-year career in TV, Razdan faced criticism from social media influencers over accepting a job without doing the proper research. Love him or hate him, it's clear that former U.S. President Donald Trump rewrote the rules regarding how a commander-in-chief should behave in the White House. For Lawrence Luau Malong-Yor Jr., Trump was a role model in his pursuit of riches and political power. Lawrence is the stepson of a former military leader in South Sudan and claimed that he made billions of dollars on his own, even though most of the country's residents live in extreme poverty. Even as the nation remained involved in seemingly endless war and struggled to provide enough food for its population, Lawrence flaunted his wealth in some flashy ways. At one point, he uploaded a video to Facebook that showed him tossing around $100 bills strewn across a bed. He indicated that the total amount of cash topped $1 million and described his location being at a presidential suite at an expensive hotel. However, he did not specify what city he was in. Aside from merely showing off his cash collection, Lawrence, or Young Tycoon as he calls himself, insisted that he was a generous philanthropist. He said he donated millions of dollars to organizations including the Red Cross in Kenya and South Sudan. Among the other recipients of seven-figure donations he claimed were churches across the region. Of course, representatives of these groups provided an entirely different story. John Mayom of the South Sudan Red Cross asserted that he knew nothing of any such donation, saying they were following up on this misleading and malicious claim. As for conspicuous consumption and shameless display of wealth, Lawrence made it clear that he didn't think it was so wrong. In fact, he described himself as a die-hard Trump supporter and pointed to the former president as a shining example of someone who's not ashamed of his massive bank account. Calling his hero the world's greatest president and the world's greatest man, Lawrence said that Trump is, quote, someone who likes to show off that he's rich. In that respect, Lawrence said the two men have something in common, believing he's just like the Donald. Before exploring the scope of his daring scheme, let's look at Lawrence's background and the events that led him to a life of luxury at the expense of his suffering countrymen. As the stepson of a mighty army general with close ties to South Sudan President Salva Kiir, Lawrence was given plenty of opportunities to skim money out of the government's coffers to fund his lavish spending habits. Nevertheless, he repeatedly assured critics that his immense wealth was in no way due to his family's political connections. Instead, he attempted to portray himself as a brilliant entrepreneur who was able to amass a fortune based only on his own intelligence and hard work. That depiction of himself seemed unbelievable on its face since he had no known background in business. His behavior raised plenty of red flags, but he wasn't the first in his influential family to face severe accusations of wrongdoing. His stepfather, Paul Malong Awan, served as the military's chief of staff and allegedly used his position to carry out atrocities of all types. In addition to commanding the military to commit brutal and violent acts, the United Nations claimed that the general also forced children to fight alongside adults in the army throughout a years-long civil war. Lawrence was born in 1988, and his mother married Malong a few years later after his biological father's passing. This set the boy up for a privileged life with a nation that offered few opportunities to rise out of crippling poverty. His family moved away during his childhood, but he was considered a member of South Sudan's elite upon moving back. In addition to posing for photos with the president and other top officials, Lawrence was given the cushy government job of reaching out to foreign investors interested in launching diamond, gold, or oil excavation efforts. This position allowed him to travel around the world on the government's dime while adding expensive new items to his massive collection of luxury toys. Despite presenting himself as a billionaire tycoon, Lawrence simultaneously crafted the persona of a selfless public servant. He claimed that all of his efforts to make himself rich were also part of a plan to bring new jobs into South Sudan. While the nation sank deeper into the grips of war, Lawrence insisted that he only wanted to allow the citizens to lay down their weapons and earn an honest living. As it turns out, there wasn't much about his behavior that could be described as honest. He repeatedly denied accusations that he only got rich because of his family's connections. Instead, he said he was, quote, blessed by Jesus Christ, and promised ordinary citizens they could reach the same level of success. At one point, Lawrence insisted that his family name didn't make any difference. He was a businessman, and that's all there was to it. Although he tried to paint himself as a savior for the citizens of South Sudan, his social media presence offered a different perspective. He posted Facebook pictures and videos that showed him next to private jets, luxury vehicles, and almost any other conceivable symbol of extreme wealth. Lawrence insisted that he didn't use his Facebook profile to flaunt his money and possessions when confronted with the apparent inconsistency. He didn't want to be a wealthy man, he just wanted to help his people through his Facebook. Wow, how noble. He often referred to himself using some favorite nicknames along with his staged social media posts. In addition to frequently calling himself Young Tycoon, Lawrence also posted a picture of himself flying first class and referred to himself as Smart Boy for life. Flying business class or coach, he argued, would negatively impact his ability to attract high-rolling investors. Flying economy wouldn't attract the people he needed to win over. Therefore, it's first class or nothing. While he was living the life of a pampered globetrotter, the people back home in South Sudan were embroiled in a disastrous military conflict and a lack of necessities, including food and clean water. A thorough investigation discovered how much climate change was impacting the people. Desert regions have grown hotter and more inhospitable in recent years, which has caused countless people to move away from the areas they called home their entire lives. The violence that has dominated much of the country throughout a period of internal strife has contributed to the displacement of even more South Sudanese individuals and families. The brutal civil war dates back to 2013, shortly after the country declared independence from Sudan and became the newest official nation on Earth. Before that, Sudan had been embroiled in its own violent conflict for generations. Many of the brutal practices that were common in Sudan were also upheld by the leaders of South Sudan. The regime extinguished dozens of prisoners and hundreds more were sentenced to capital punishment under the country's strict legal system. To make matters worse, the nation was secretive about how it handled executions, so there were probably some forms of capital punishment carried out without being reported. Some children were reportedly handed down extreme sentences was during the nation's extended period of fear and turmoil. Hundreds of thousands of people were taken out over 6 years as military leaders who backed the nation's president squared off against those who sided with former Vice President Riek Machar. With adequate health care and clean water in short supply, much of the nation has grown accustomed to living in reprehensible conditions. The vicious cycle of poverty is made even worse because nearly 3 in 4 South Sudanese citizens are believed to be illiterate. Things became so bad in this troubled nation that an organization with ties to George Clooney took an interest in exposing the situation to the rest of the world. He co-founded The Sentry, which performed a deep analysis of what had gone wrong in South Sudan and what other countries could do to help. Following the eye-popping results of that probe, Clooney warned nations worldwide that the unrest in South Sudan could soon expand to impact other regions of the planet. He said that people should care not just because it's the right thing to do, but because at one point or another, it's something that everyone will be dealing with. The group's report determined that a corrupt network at the helm of South Sudan's government has been responsible for defrauding the struggling citizens of the nation out of what little money they had. Although Lawrence was the flashy big spender, his stepfather was really wreaking havoc behind the scenes. Malong was the governor of the northern Bahr el Ghazal region between 2008 and 2014, but when he took over as a prominent military leader, his behavior triggered some red flags. He was the top officer in the South Sudan People's Defense Forces until May 2017. During that time, he served as a personal advisor to the president and allegedly orchestrated a series of war crimes. Dating back to 2013, 2 militia groups carried out a slew of executions with the apparent goal of protecting the president and Malong. Reports of the atrocities captured the attention of the United States, which tried and failed to impose sanctions against the general and other high-ranking officials. As the Sentry determined in its report, Malong also collected a range of luxury possessions and extravagant residences in Uganda throughout this period. One spacious home was built within a fortress and boasted a 7,000 square foot floor plan. A second villa was about 6,000 square feet of space, built in an exclusive Bungu community. In addition to his government salary, Malong and his close relatives maintained a financial interest in various international firms. President Kiir has also courted controversy through his alarming actions and conspicuous displays of wealth. Although his salary as president was a mere $60,000 per year, investigations found that he had amassed a fortune in other countries. Furthermore, his relatives were living in luxury and escaped the brutality and poverty affecting citizens in every corner of South Sudan. Close relatives of the president were tied to scams and schemes that allowed them to profit off the civil war while bringing more uncertainty and food insecurity to the nation. Kiir funded a sprawling ranch where he was free to store a range of weapons and other military gear that he bought with all his ill-gotten riches. There were even attack helicopters found at the ranch, leading to concerns that the unhinged president might turn his cache of weapons against the citizens he was supposed to be leading. While some corrupt political and military leaders can escape justice based on their financial assets and influential connections, Lawrence was finally brought to justice in 2021. He was eventually charged with a scam he perpetrated with a pair of accomplices. Prosecutors determined that the 3 scammers convinced a pair of foreign investors to sink their money into a fraudulent gold business in Uganda. As large sums of money moved through accounts based in multiple countries, evidence showed that the scam brought in more than $1 million. He was convicted on multiple counts, including conspiracy, obtaining money through false pretenses, and making false claims. At his sentencing, Lawrence learned he would spend 6 years behind bars for his involvement in the scheme. Although it might seem as though justice was paid in this case, plenty more work must be done to reduce the corruption and crime that continues to leave the South Sudanese people living in fear and poverty. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section whether or not you think people are supposed to triple check the legitimacy of job postings in today's environment.